The first person Adrian Vale killed after the world froze was not a monster. It was his best friend. 3 months earlier, Adrian had been the kind of man nobody remembered after leaving the room. He worked night shifts at a massive distribution warehouse outside Frosthaven City, unloading canned food, bottled water, medicine, heaters, batteries, and enough emergency supplies to keep thousands of people alive. His coworkers laughed at him because he never complained. His girlfriend Serena laughed at him because he never earned enough. And his childhood friend Marcus laughed hardest of all. When the first emergency alert appeared, nobody understood what it meant. Scientists announced that a chain of atmospheric anomalies had begun spreading across the northern hemisphere. Temperatures were falling much faster than any climate model could explain. 20 degrees, 0, then -50. Within 72 hours, highways disappeared beneath snowstorms. Power grids collapsed, aircraft froze on runways, fuel lines cracked. Entire cities became enormous concrete tombs. Frosthaven reached -100 degrees Celsius on the 6th day. At that temperature, stepping outside without specialized protection was almost the same as choosing death. Windows fractured. Metal became brittle. Cars refused to start. Water pipes burst inside walls. And food became more valuable than money. Adrian had prepared better than most. The moment he realized the disaster was real, he emptied his savings. He bought insulation, propane cylinders, blankets, canned meat, rice, medical supplies, thermal clothing, portable batteries, and every compact heater he could find. Marcus called him paranoid. Serena called him pathetic. Then the temperature dropped below -60. Suddenly, Adrian was no longer pathetic. He was useful. That was when they came to his apartment. Marcus smiled. Serena cried. Behind them stood 3 neighbors Adrian barely knew. They begged him to let them inside. Adrian did. That mistake cost him his life. For 11 days, he divided his food equally. He shared his heating fuel. He gave Serena the warmest blankets. He even handed Marcus his spare thermal jacket when the man's fingers began turning blue. Then the supplies started running low. The smiles disappeared. Marcus became the first to suggest rationing Adrian's portions. Serena agreed. After all, she whispered, Adrian had always been able to endure more than everyone else. 2 days later, they tied him to a chair. Marcus opened the balcony door. Arctic wind exploded into the apartment like a living beast. Adrian screamed until his throat tore apart. Serena stood behind Marcus, wearing the coat Adrian had bought for her, and refused to meet his eyes. The last thing Adrian heard before the door closed was Marcus saying that one useless man dying meant several useful people could live longer. Cold swallowed everything. His skin burned. His lungs seized. His heartbeat slowed. Then darkness came. Adrian thought that was the end. Instead, he opened his eyes 3 months earlier. The warehouse ceiling stretched above him. A forklift beeped somewhere nearby. His hands were warm. His lungs worked. And Marcus was standing 10 meters away, joking with another employee. For almost a minute, Adrian could not move. Then a cold mechanical voice sounded inside his mind. It informed him that unbearable betrayal and death had fulfilled the conditions for awakening an infinite supply system. Adrian stared at the pallets surrounding him. The voice continued. Any non-living resource personally registered by Adrian could be stored inside a limitless preservation space. Anything stored there would remain frozen in its original condition, unaffected by time. But that was only the beginning. Once a resource was successfully registered, the system could reproduce it endlessly. Food, water, medicine, fuel, clothing, tools, weapons, construction materials. As long as Adrian touched one valid sample and completed registration, scarcity ceased to exist. His fingers trembled, not from fear, from excitement. In his previous life, people had murdered each other for a single packet of instant noodles. Now Adrian could produce mountains of food with a thought. Countries would collapse. Governments would disappear. Billions would freeze. But Adrian would never run out of anything again. He looked across the warehouse at Marcus. For the first time since waking up, Adrian smiled. The apocalypse was coming, and this time he knew exactly who deserved saving. He also knew who did not. Adrian spent the following weeks pretending nothing had changed. He continued working. He nodded when Marcus mocked his old jacket. He remained silent when Serena complained that he never took her anywhere expensive. But every night, Adrian prepared. The warehouse became his treasure vault. He registered rice, flour, pasta, canned beef, canned fish, chocolate, powdered milk, cooking oil, coffee, tea, bottled water, energy drinks, vitamins, antibiotics, painkillers, bandages, disinfectant, thermal blankets, generators, batteries, diesel fuel, propane, heaters, solar panels, insulation boards, steel plates, tools, and hundreds of other resources. One bottle became infinite bottles. One package became infinite packages. One fuel canister became an endless ocean of energy hidden inside a space nobody else could access. Still, Adrian understood that supplies alone were not enough. His previous apartment had become a death trap because it was designed for ordinary winters. This time, he needed a fortress. He purchased an abandoned luxury hotel on the mountain above Frosthaven. The place had failed years earlier and could be bought cheaply because nobody wanted to maintain it. Adrian wanted only the central building. He reinforced the walls with layers of vacuum insulation. He replaced ordinary windows with thick armored panels. He installed multiple heating systems, independent generators, air filtration, water recycling, security cameras, mechanical locks, emergency tunnels, and steel shutters capable of sealing every entrance. Beneath the hotel, he converted an old wine cellar into a massive underground living complex. Nobody understood why. Contractors assumed he was an eccentric survivalist. Adrian let them laugh. He had heard laughter before. It sounded much better than begging. There were only 4 people he intended to bring inside. The first was Elena Cross, an emergency physician who had saved Adrian's mother years ago, without ever asking whether the family could afford treatment. The second was Maya Chen, an electrical engineer who had once repaired the warehouse heating system during a brutal winter, while management argued about costs. The third was Sophia Laurent, a chef whose tiny restaurant Adrian visited whenever life became unbearable. She remembered every customer's favorite meal and secretly fed homeless people after closing. The fourth was Claire Bennett. Claire was different. She had been Adrian's childhood neighbor. When Adrian's father died, Claire was the person who sat beside him at the funeral without saying anything. When everyone else treated Adrian like background noise, Claire remembered his birthday. And in the previous timeline, Claire had sent him one final message during the catastrophe. Her building had lost power. She was freezing. Adrian had tried to reach her. Marcus stopped him. 3 hours later, Claire stopped responding. This time, Adrian would not let that happen. He contacted all 4 women separately. He did not tell them the full truth. He simply warned them that an extreme climate event was coming and offered them secure rooms at the mountain property. Elena believed the scientific data enough to accept. Maya became interested after reviewing Adrian's power systems. Sophia's laughed at first, then agreed when Adrian offered her complete control of a professional kitchen stocked with anything she wanted. Claire needed no convincing. She looked at Adrian for several seconds before quietly saying that, if he was scared enough to build a fortress, she trusted him enough to enter it. Meanwhile, Serena became furious. She discovered Adrian had sold his apartment lease and moved most of his possessions. She demanded to know where the money had come from. Adrian only smiled. Serena shouted that a boyfriend was supposed to share everything with his girlfriend. Adrian remembered her face while Marcus opened the balcony door. He replied calmly that she was right. A boyfriend should. Then he ended their relationship. Serena stood speechless. For years, she had believed Adrian would tolerate anything because he was afraid of being alone. She did not understand that Adrian had already experienced something far worse than loneliness. He had experienced dying beside people he trusted. 30 days before the freeze, the mountain fortress was completed. 20 days before the freeze, the 4 women moved in. 10 days before the freeze, supermarket shelves began emptying. 5 days before the freeze, governments finally admitted that the atmospheric collapse could become catastrophic. Then Frosthaven woke beneath a sky the color of steel. Snow fell so densely that buildings vanished beyond a few hundred meters. The temperature plunged. -30, -45, -60. Inside Adrian's fortress, fireplaces burned warmly. Soft lights illuminated the underground living hall. Sophia prepared steak and roasted vegetables in the kitchen. Maya monitored generators that could theoretically operate for decades. Elena organized medicine that could never expire. Claire stood beside a reinforced window, watching the blizzard erase the world. Then Adrian's phone began vibrating. Hundreds of messages, coworkers, neighbors, people who had mocked his preparations, people who suddenly remembered that Adrian existed. And among them was Serena. Her message contained only 5 words. "Please, Adrian, come save me." Adrian stared at the screen without emotion. Then another message appeared. This one came from Marcus. "Brother, I know where you are." A security alarm sounded through the fortress. Maya turned toward the surveillance monitors. Several vehicles were crawling through the storm toward the mountain gate. Dozens of people were inside them. At the front stood Marcus, wrapped in stolen winter gear. Beside him and behind them, men carrying axes, rifles, and crowbars were already climbing out into the snow. Adrian slowly rose from his chair. In his first life, they had thrown him into the cold because they believed his supplies belonged to them. This time, they had crossed an entire frozen city to make the same mistake. Adrian opened the security control panel. The outer gate remained sealed. Beyond it, Marcus raised his rifle and shouted into the camera. Adrian leaned closer to the microphone. His voice was almost gentle. Then he told Marcus that he remembered everything. Marcus froze, not because of the temperature, because Adrian began describing, word for word, the final conversation they had shared in a life that should never have existed. And as Marcus's face turned pale, Adrian activated the fortress's first defensive system. The first defensive system was almost insultingly simple. Adrian did not fire a bullet. He did not release gas. He did not open the gates and challenge Marcus like some reckless hero desperate to prove himself. He turned off the heated pavement outside the main entrance. That was all. For the past 12 hours, the road leading up the mountain had remained barely passable because heating coils buried beneath the surface prevented the snow from becoming solid ice. Marcus and his group had assumed they were simply lucky enough to reach the fortress before the storm became impossible. They were wrong. The moment Adrian disabled the system, the exposed road began surrendering to the cold. Snow hardened. Moisture froze. Tires lost traction. The vehicles behind Marcus started sliding backward. One slammed sideways into another. A third rotated completely, blocking the narrow mountain path. People shouted. Someone fired a rifle at the steel gate. The bullet flattened against reinforced plating. Inside the control room, Maya stared at the monitors. She had known Adrian was prepared. She had not realized he had designed the entire approach to the fortress as a trap. The mountain road was narrow enough that attackers could not spread out. The surrounding slopes were too steep to climb safely. The gate stood beneath overlapping surveillance cameras, motion detectors, thermal sensors, and automated floodlights. Anyone trying to attack the building would be visible long before they came close. Marcus continued shouting into the camera. He demanded that Adrian stop playing games. He claimed the people outside only wanted shelter. Then one of the armed men behind him raised an axe and slammed it against the gate. Adrian watched without blinking. In his previous life, Marcus had used the language of fairness right until the moment he tied Adrian to a chair. People like Marcus never called theft theft. They called it sharing. They never called murder murder. They called it survival. Adrian activated the external speakers. His voice rolled across the frozen mountain. He told them there was no room. Marcus screamed that the building was enormous. Adrian replied that space had never been the problem. Trust was. Serena stepped forward. Her face was almost completely hidden behind scarves and goggles. She shouted that Adrian was being cruel. She reminded him that they had once loved each other. Adrian almost laughed. Love. That word sounded different after death. He remembered Serena standing behind Marcus while frost consumed his hands. He remembered begging her to untie him. He remembered her whispering that she was sorry while doing absolutely nothing. Adrian leaned toward the microphone. He told Serena that apologies were cheapest when the victim was already dying. Her expression changed. Marcus immediately grabbed her arm. He was beginning to understand something impossible. Adrian knew, not vaguely, not suspiciously. He knew every detail. Marcus demanded to know how. Adrian did not answer. Instead, he looked toward Maya. She understood immediately. With one command, she activated the second layer of defense. Massive floodlights erupted from hidden positions around the gate. The white glare struck Marcus's group directly. For people trapped in darkness and blowing snow, the sudden brightness was blinding. Several stumbled backward. Then the speakers emitted a warning. They had 60 seconds to leave the restricted zone. Marcus fired at one of the cameras. The shot missed. 50 seconds. One of the men began shouting that they should retreat. Marcus punched him. 40 seconds. Serena begged Marcus to stop. 30 seconds. The group fractured. Half wanted to leave. The others stared at the fortress with the desperate hunger of starving wolves. 20 seconds. Marcus raised his rifle again. 10. Adrian pressed a single button. The mountain exploded, not literally. But to the people outside, it must have felt like the world itself had attacked them. Compressed air cannons hidden along the walls released enormous clouds of powdered snow and ice crystals directly into the approach corridor. The blast did not kill anyone. It did something more useful. It destroyed visibility. Marcus's group vanished inside a white storm. Men screamed. Someone slipped and fell. Another dropped his weapon. The wind immediately carried the artificial snow into the natural blizzard, turning the entire entrance into a frozen maze. Adrian watched the thermal display. Red human shapes scrambled backward. Several reached the vehicles. Others crawled. Within minutes, the surviving convoy retreated down the mountain. Marcus was the last to leave. Before disappearing, he turned toward the nearest camera. Even through the thermal image, Adrian could recognize the hatred in his posture. This was not finished. Adrian knew that. He was counting on it. Behind him, Sophia placed a cup of hot coffee on the desk. The smell alone felt obscene compared to the frozen world outside. Adrian thanked her. Sophia studied him quietly. She had questions. All four women did. They had heard him tell Marcus that he remembered something that clearly had never happened. They had seen the expression on Serena's face. They had watched Adrian prepare for the apocalypse with impossible precision. Eventually, Claire asked what everyone else was thinking. How had Adrian known? The room became silent. Adrian looked at the four women. In his first life, he had died surrounded by people who betrayed him. In this life, he had chosen these four because each represented the opposite: competence, loyalty, warmth. If he planned to survive with them for years, he could not build that future entirely on lies. So Adrian told them the truth. He described his first death. He explained Marcus's betrayal. He told Claire that she had died before he could reach her. He told Elena that the hospital had collapsed after emergency fuel ran out. He told Maya that the Eastern Power Station had exploded during a desperate restart attempt. He told Sophia that her restaurant had been looted on the 8th day. Then he explained the system. He expected disbelief. Instead, Maya asked for proof. Adrian smiled. He placed an unopened bottle of water on the table. Then another appeared beside it. And another. And another. Within seconds, identical bottles covered the desk. Sophia stared. Elena touched one. Claire simply looked at Adrian. He showed them food next: steak, rice, fresh vegetables, coffee beans, chocolate. Then medicine, fuel canisters, batteries, blankets. Every item appeared perfectly preserved. No deterioration. No shortage, no limit. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Sophia started laughing. Not because she thought it was funny. Because the situation was too impossible for any other reaction. The entire world was collapsing from scarcity while they were sitting inside the only place where scarcity no longer existed. Maya was the first to understand the true scale. If Adrian could duplicate raw materials as easily as food, their fortress was not merely a shelter. It was the foundation of a civilization. Metal, copper, plastic, fuel, glass, medical equipment, seeds, electronic components. With enough knowledge, they could rebuild almost anything. Elena immediately raised the next question. If they possessed unlimited resources, could they really ignore everyone outside? Adrian had expected that. He answered carefully. They would help people, but not everyone, and never without rules. In his first life, kindness without judgment had killed him. This time, survival would require boundaries. Anyone allowed into the fortress would contribute something. Medical knowledge, engineering, agriculture, construction, research. People who could strengthen the community would receive protection. People who demanded resources merely because they existed would receive nothing. Claire asked about children. Adrian answered immediately. Children were different. So were people unable to contribute through no choice of their own. His rules would not be cruel. They would be controlled. That distinction mattered. 3 days passed. Outside temperatures reached -88. The national emergency broadcasts became weaker. Several television channels disappeared entirely. Internet service became unstable. Satellite messaging still worked. Through emergency forums, Adrian watched Frosthaven collapse district by district. People burned furniture, then doors, then books, then anything else that could produce heat. Apartment buildings became fortresses. Grocery stores became battlefields. Police units stopped responding to calls. Fuel became more valuable than gold. And every day, messages arrived at Adrian's mountain refuge. Some begged, some threatened, some promised money. Adrian ignored most of them. Then one message caught Elena's attention. It came from Frosthaven Central Hospital. Their backup generators had less than 6 hours of fuel remaining. More than 200 patients were still alive. Among them were newborn infants. Adrian read the message twice. This was the kind of decision that defined what his new world would become. Saving the hospital meant revealing that he had access to large amounts of fuel. Once people realized that, secrecy would end. But doing nothing meant hundreds of avoidable deaths. Adrian opened his infinite supply storage. Fuel was not a problem, transportation was. At -90 degrees, ordinary vehicles were unreliable. Fortunately, Adrian had prepared for that too. Deep inside the underground garage sat a tracked polar transport vehicle, modified by Maya before the storm. Its engine was enclosed inside a heated compartment. Its fuel system was insulated. Its cabin could survive temperatures far below anything Frosthaven had yet experienced. Maya looked at the storm map. Then she told Adrian that the trip was insane. Visibility was nearly zero. Several roads had disappeared beneath snowdrifts. Sections of the city were blocked by abandoned vehicles. Adrian asked if it was possible. Maya hesitated, then nodded. Not safe. Adrian smiled faintly. Safety had become a luxury. Within an hour, the transport was ready. Elena insisted on coming. If they reached the hospital, she could help determine which patients could be moved. Maya joined because nobody understood the vehicle better. Claire stayed behind with Sophia to control the fortress. Before Adrian left, Claire grabbed his sleeve. She told him not to become addicted to saving people. Adrian understood exactly what she meant. A man with infinite supplies could easily begin believing he had infinite responsibility. He promised he would remember. The outer gate opened. Arctic wind screamed into the tunnel. The tracked vehicle descended from the mountain and entered the dead city. Frosthaven looked like the corpse of civilization. Buildings were buried halfway to their windows. Traffic lights hung frozen above empty intersections. Cars had become white lumps beneath the snow. Occasionally, they passed human shapes lying motionless beside roads. Elena stopped looking after the fifth one. Adrian did not. He forced himself to see every body. This was the world now. Ignoring it would not change anything. 2 hours later, they reached the hospital. The main entrance was barricaded. Armed security guards nearly fired until Elena identified herself. Inside, the temperature was only slightly above freezing. Doctors wore coats while working. Patients were wrapped in layers of blankets. Emergency lights flickered. The hospital director met Adrian in the lobby. He looked exhausted enough to collapse. When Adrian said he had brought fuel, the man's expression transformed. Hope. Real hope. They unloaded the first canisters, then more. And more. Maya stared at Adrian. He was producing them inside the transport where nobody could see. Enough for one day, then a week, then a month. The hospital director could barely speak. Adrian gave him one condition. Nobody was allowed to ask where the fuel came from. The man agreed instantly. That was when a gunshot echoed from outside. Everyone froze. Another followed. Then another. Security rushed toward the entrance. Adrian checked the external camera feed from the transport. Several vehicles had surrounded the hospital. A large group of armed survivors was climbing out. At their front stood Marcus. He had followed them, and this time he had brought far more men. Marcus stared directly toward the hospital entrance. Then he raised a loudspeaker. His voice echoed across the frozen street. He told everyone inside that Adrian Vale possessed unlimited supplies. Food, medicine, fuel, enough to save the entire city. And if Adrian refused to share willingly, Marcus said, they would tear the hospital apart until they found where he was hiding it. Adrian slowly closed his eyes. So this was Marcus's plan, not to defeat him, to turn everyone else against him. When Adrian opened his eyes again, there was no fear left in them, only calculation, because Marcus had just made the worst mistake possible. He had gathered every predator in the district into one place, and Adrian had been wondering how to find them. Marcus believed he had finally found Adrian's weakness. People, not walls, not weapons, not cold. A fortress could repel bullets. A locked gate could keep out raiders. Infinite supplies could erase hunger and thirst. But once desperate survivors learned that one man possessed more food than entire districts, no amount of steel could stop envy from spreading. Marcus understood that instinctively, so he did not attack Adrian directly. He turned scarcity into a weapon. The loudspeaker crackled again outside the hospital. Marcus shouted that Adrian had enough fuel to keep thousands warm, enough food to feed every starving family in Frosthaven, enough medicine to save children dying in dark apartments. He told the crowd that Adrian was hiding everything inside a private mountain palace, while ordinary people froze to death. The accusation was simple, cruel, effective. Inside the hospital lobby, nurses turned toward Adrian. Patients whispered. Security guards exchanged uncomfortable looks. Even the hospital director seemed shaken. Adrian did not blame them. From their perspective, Marcus's story sounded believable. In a world where a can of meat could start a murder, one man arriving with impossible amounts of fuel looked suspicious. Marcus knew exactly how to frame it. He was not demanding theft. He was demanding justice. That word had destroyed more civilizations than hunger ever could. Adrian walked toward the entrance. Elena caught his arm. She warned him not to go outside. Adrian looked through the narrow reinforced glass. Marcus had brought nearly 40 people. Most carried improvised weapons. Some had rifles. Others had shotguns, hunting bows, axes, pipes, knives. Their clothing was mismatched. Blankets wrapped around shoulders. plastic sheeting taped over boots. Several people already showed signs of frost injury, but Marcus himself was dressed well. Too well thermal jacket, insulated gloves, military-grade goggles, a new rifle. Adrian noticed immediately. Marcus had been looting, not surviving looting. That distinction mattered. Adrian opened the hospital intercom. He told Marcus to leave. Laughter erupted outside. Marcus raised the loudspeaker. Then he asked Adrian why one man deserved endless resources while an entire city suffered. Adrian replied that Marcus was welcome to explain where he got his expensive winter equipment. The laughter stopped. Several people around Marcus looked at him. Marcus's jaw tightened. Adrian continued. He asked whether Marcus had told them about the apartments he raided, about the food he stole, about the old couple in West District whose generator disappeared the same night Marcus's group arrived. That accusation was partly deduction, partly memory. In Adrian's first life, Marcus had become dangerous astonishingly quickly. He had always possessed the instinct of a parasite. The apocalypse merely removed consequences. Marcus shouted that Adrian was lying. Adrian replied by mentioning the serial number printed on Marcus's rifle. Maya looked at him. Adrian had recognized the weapon from a security report transmitted 2 days earlier. A neighborhood defense group had posted that one of their rifles was stolen after 3 members were killed. Marcus looked down at the gun. That tiny movement was enough. The crowd noticed. Adrian pressed harder. He told them that if Marcus truly cared about saving people, he would not have brought 40 armed men to a hospital. He would have brought children, doctors, engineers, families. He had brought fighters because he wanted control. Several people began stepping away from Marcus. That was exactly what Adrian wanted. Marcus understood the crowd was slipping, so he did what desperate men always did when words stopped working. He fired. The bullet struck the hospital door. Chaos exploded. Patients screamed. Security guards raised their weapons. Marcus's men scattered behind vehicles. Adrian moved instantly. He ordered everyone away from the windows. Maya activated the transport's remote systems. Its headlights turned on. External speakers began broadcasting a warning. Marcus fired again. This time, hospital security returned fire. The street erupted. Bullets cracked through blowing snow. Adrian hated the sound. Not because he feared violence, because violence wasted resources more precious than ammunition. People. In the old world, 40 armed men could be replaced by 40 more. In the frozen world, every adult capable of working represented labor, knowledge, strength, future children. Rebuilding civilization by killing everyone was easy. Rebuilding civilization after killing everyone was impossible. Adrian needed a faster solution. He closed his eyes. The infinite supply system responded. During the previous month, he had registered dozens of specialized tools. Among them were non-lethal riot control devices taken from an emergency security shipment, compressed irritant launchers, flash devices, stun batons, portable acoustic emitters. He had infinite copies. The problem was deployment. Then Maya understood. She looked at the hospital roof. The building still had functional maintenance access. Adrian smiled. 5 minutes later, they climbed the stairwell. Wind hammered the rooftop door. Maya nearly lost her footing when they stepped outside. The cold was vicious. Even through specialized clothing, it felt like knives pressing against every exposed seam. Visibility was less than 30 meters. Adrian carried a heavy launcher, not 5. He had produced them one after another. Maya stared at the pile and muttered that she would never get used to this. Adrian told her she did not need to. She only needed to aim. They positioned the launchers behind rooftop ventilation units. Below them, Marcus continued firing sporadically. Hospital security answered from protected positions. Adrian waited. Timing mattered. When Marcus's group clustered behind 3 abandoned vehicles, Adrian gave the signal. The first flash device exploded. A white burst illuminated the snowstorm. Several attackers screamed. The second went off behind them. Then a third. Confusion spread instantly. Maya fired an irritant canister. The projectile landed beneath a truck. Gas dispersed low across the ground. Men stumbled from cover coughing. Another canister landed near the second vehicle. Then Adrian activated the acoustic emitter. A piercing directional tone slammed into the crowd. People dropped weapons and covered their ears. The attack disintegrated within seconds. Hospital security surged forward. Adrian ordered them not to shoot unless absolutely necessary. Marcus saw what was happening. He ran, of course he did. He abandoned his men, again. Adrian watched him climb into a snowmobile hidden behind a delivery truck. Then Marcus accelerated into the storm. Adrian raised the launcher. Maya asked whether he wanted to disable the vehicle. Adrian lowered the weapon. No, he wanted Marcus alive. Maya looked surprised, Adrian explained. Marcus was useful. Every time he ran, he gathered the worst people around him. Greedy people. Violent people. People who believed strength entitled them to everything others had built. Marcus was becoming a magnet for predators. As long as Adrian knew where Marcus was, he knew where danger was gathering. Why hunt wolves one by one when one frightened dog could lead him to the entire pack? Below, the remaining attackers surrendered. Several turned on one another immediately. Some insisted Marcus had lied to them. Others admitted they thought Adrian had warehouses full of supplies. Adrian did not care about excuses. He cared about patterns. He ordered security to separate them. Elena treated the injured. Then Adrian questioned each survivor individually. The story that emerged was worse than expected. Frosthaven was no longer one city. It was becoming territories. The Western District was controlled by a former private security contractor named Darius Kane. He had nearly 200 armed followers. They occupied a shopping complex and controlled several warehouses. The Southern Industrial Zone belonged to another faction. A group calling themselves the Brotherhood of Ash had seized fuel depots and burned anyone who resisted. The downtown area was fractured into dozens of smaller groups. And in the north, something stranger was happening. People were disappearing. Entire apartment floors, no bodies, no blood. Just empty rooms and open doors. Adrian remembered none of that from his previous life. That unsettled him. His resurrection had already changed events. Perhaps because he survived. Perhaps because the system existed now. Or perhaps the previous timeline had simply ended before he learned the truth. Either way, the future was becoming unpredictable. The hospital situation needed resolution first. Adrian met privately with the director. He offered a deal. The hospital would continue receiving fuel, food, medicine, and essential equipment. In return, it would become the first protected satellite facility of Adrian's new settlement. The hospital would remain independent in medical decisions. But security, logistics, and resource distribution would follow strict rules. No uncontrolled giveaways, no mob access, no stockpiling by individuals. Every shipment would be documented. Every recipient registered. The director hesitated. Adrian understood why. Nobody wanted to trade one crisis for dictatorship. So Adrian added another condition. The records would be public. Anyone could see where resources went. He would control supply, but not hide distribution. That changed everything. The director agreed. Elena looked impressed. Adrian did not need praise, he needed systems. Civilization failed when trust disappeared. Transparency could not eliminate greed, but it could make lies harder. By evening, the hospital's heating systems were stable. The temperature inside rose above 15 degrees. Patients cried when warm air began flowing again. For the first time in days, nurses removed their gloves while working. Adrian watched quietly. This was what power should feel like. Not applause, not obedience, impact. Then a child approached him. A small girl with tangled black hair and a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She handed him a chocolate wrapper. Adrian recognized the brand. One he had supplied. She told him it was the first sweet thing she had eaten since the storm began. Adrian crouched. He asked whether she wanted another. The girl shook her head. She said her little brother had not received one yet. Adrian felt something tighten inside his chest. In his first life, he had thought survival meant keeping everything close. Now he understood the harder truth. Resources had value only if they created something worth surviving for. He produced another chocolate bar from his coat pocket. Then another. The girl's eyes widened. Adrian told her to take both. She smiled. That smile stayed with him during the drive home. The storm worsened overnight. Temperature dropped to -96. Radio reports confirmed that several smaller towns outside Frosthaven had lost contact completely. One government broadcast warned that the atmosphere could continue cooling. The announcer used careful language. Extreme conditions, historic anomaly, temporary instability. Adrian heard what they were avoiding. -100 was not the bottom. The fortress gate opened when the tracked vehicle returned. Claire was waiting in the garage. The moment Adrian stepped out, she punched him lightly in the chest, then hugged him. He froze, not because he disliked it, because nobody had hugged him like that in years. Claire released him quickly and complained that he smelled like fuel. Sophia arrived carrying steaming soup. Maya immediately began explaining everything that had happened at the hospital. Within minutes, the underground dining room became chaotic. Warm. Loud. Adrian sat at the table while Sophia served beef stew thick with potatoes, carrots, and herbs. Fresh bread rested beside it. Butter softened near the stove. There was hot tea, coffee, fruit, dessert. Outside, millions of people would have killed for one plate. Inside, food was unlimited. That reality made every meal feel sacred. Sophia watched Adrian eat. Then she asked the question nobody else had dared to ask. Why 4 women? Adrian nearly choked. Claire looked away. Elena smiled suspiciously. Maya suddenly became very interested in her soup. Adrian explained that he had chosen each of them for practical reasons, Doctor. Chef, trusted friend. Sophia raised an eyebrow. She asked whether he expected them to believe that was the entire reason. Adrian told her yes. She laughed. Claire kicked Sophia beneath the table. The tension eased. For a brief moment, they were not survivors. They were simply 5 people eating dinner together. That moment mattered more than Adrian expected. The system voice returned later that night. Adrian was alone in his room when it spoke. A new condition had been fulfilled. The system recognized that his protected population had exceeded 100 lives through direct resource support. A new function had awakened. Infinite supply was evolving. Until now, Adrian could duplicate any registered non-living resource. The new ability was called territory recognition. Any secure territory under Adrian's effective control could now be designated as part of his supply network. Within recognized territory, registered resources could be delivered remotely. Adrian stopped breathing. The implications were enormous. No transport, no dangerous journeys, no trucks carrying fuel through blizzards. If the hospital became recognized territory, Adrian could send supplies there without leaving the fortress. He immediately tested the function. The system asked him to designate an area. He selected the mountain fortress. Recognition succeeded instantly. Every room became visible in his awareness like points on an invisible map. Adrian focused on the kitchen. He imagined a crate of bottled water. A second later, the system confirmed delivery. Adrian ran downstairs. Sophia was standing in the kitchen, staring at a wooden crate that had appeared beside the refrigerator. She slowly turned toward him. Adrian grinned. By sunrise, they had tested dozens of deliveries. Food to storage rooms, medicine to Elena's clinic, fuel to generator chambers, tools to Maya's workshop. Everything appeared exactly where Adrian intended. There were limits. He could only deliver registered items. The destination had to belong to recognized territory, and territory required stable control, clear boundaries, and a minimum level of security. But that limitation was almost irrelevant. Adrian had just solved logistics, the most dangerous problem in the frozen world. He immediately contacted the hospital. After several hours of verification, the system accepted it as a secondary territory. Adrian sent a single crate of medicine. The hospital director called 30 seconds later. His voice was shaking. The crate had appeared inside a locked storage room. Adrian smiled. Civilization had changed again. For the next week, his network expanded. Hospital, fortress, a nearby water treatment facility, a small apartment block inhabited by 12 engineers and their families, a communication station on the eastern ridge. Each location accepted strict rules. Each location received unlimited essentials. Word spread, but not the whole truth. People began calling Adrian's network the Hearth, a chain of warm islands inside a frozen world. Applicants arrived daily. Adrian screened them carefully. Doctors, mechanics, farmers, scientists, former soldiers, teachers, technicians, families. He rejected violent opportunists. He accepted people willing to work. Within 10 days, more than 300 people lived under Hearth protection. Then Darius Kane sent a message, not a threat. He requested a meeting. Adrian expected Marcus to be involved. He was right. The meeting took place over encrypted video. Darius appeared on screen, large man, gray beard, calm eyes, military posture. Marcus stood behind him. Serena was there too, alive, warm. Protected, Darius greeted Adrian politely. Then he congratulated him. He said building a network this quickly was impressive. Adrian asked what he wanted. Darius smiled. Half of all supplies, half of Adrian's territories, half of every future resource route. In return, Darius promised protection. Adrian almost admired the arrogance. He asked what happened if he refused. Darius leaned back. Then the camera changed. Another feed appeared, a room, concrete walls, 10 people kneeling on the floor. Adrian recognized several immediately. They were members of the communications station. Darius had captured them. But that was impossible. The station belonged to recognized territory. Adrian should have received an alert, unless someone inside had disabled security voluntarily, a traitor. Darius said Adrian had 1 hour, half the network, or the hostages died. Marcus stepped closer to the camera. He smiled. Then he revealed something worse. He told Adrian that the communications station was not the only place with a traitor. Someone inside the mountain fortress was already working for them. Adrian stared at the screen. Behind him, 4 women stood silently, Elena, Maya, Sophia, Claire, the people he trusted most. And somewhere deep inside the fortress, a security door suddenly opened by itself. The security door opened on level 3. Adrian saw it happen on the central monitor. No alarm, no forced entry, no damaged lock. The reinforced door simply unlocked, slid aside, and exposed the maintenance corridor behind it. That frightened him more than an explosion would have. Explosions were obvious. Betrayal was quiet. Claire immediately reached for the emergency lockdown panel. Maya stopped her. If someone inside had system-level access, a full lockdown could trap the traitor exactly where they wanted to be, or trap everyone else. Adrian did not move. On the video call, Marcus was still smiling. Darius watched calmly. 1 hour. That was the deadline. 1 hour to surrender half of the hearth. 1 hour before 10 hostages died. 1 hour while an unknown infiltrator operated somewhere inside the fortress Adrian had believed untouchable. In his previous life, fear had made him reactive. This time, he did the opposite. He became still. He asked Darius one question. Why half? Darius seemed amused. Because men who ask for everything create enemies too quickly. Half was enough to control the future, while allowing Adrian to believe he still had something worth protecting. Adrian nodded slowly. That answer told him almost everything he needed to know. Darius was not Marcus. Marcus wanted possession. Darius wanted systems. He wanted leverage, infrastructure, dependency. That made him far more dangerous. Adrian ended the call without answering. Marcus shouted something just before the screen went black. Adrian ignored it. He turned to the others. Nobody left the command room. Not until they knew what was happening. Maya pulled up access logs. The level 3 door had been opened with a valid maintenance credential. Only 6 people possessed that level of access: Maya herself, Adrian, Claire, 2 technicians recruited 3 days earlier, and Owen Hale, the fortress maintenance supervisor. Adrian remembered Owen, 42 years old, former hotel engineer, quiet, competent, married, 2 children. He had passed every screening interview. That meant nothing now. Claire checked the internal cameras. The corridor beyond the open door was empty. Then one camera went black, a second, a third. Someone was moving through the blind spots. Maya whispered that whoever it was understood the surveillance grid. Adrian asked where the corridor led. Maya's expression tightened. Generator control. And one of the emergency access tunnels. The traitor was not trying to spy. They were preparing an exit, possibly an entry. Adrian looked at the fortress schematic. Then he smiled. Everyone else noticed. Sophia asked what was funny. Adrian said the traitor had made the same mistake Marcus always made. They assumed the fortress was valuable because of the things inside it. It was not. The fortress was valuable because Adrian controlled supply. Steel walls could be rebuilt. Generators could be replaced. Food could be duplicated. Even equipment could be reproduced endlessly. The only truly irreplaceable resource was people. So he would protect the people and let the traitor think everything else mattered. Adrian activated territory recognition. His awareness spread through the fortress. The system did not show him human locations, but it did show registered resources, fuel, weapons, tools, batteries, medical equipment. Every stockpile inside recognized territory glowed inside his mind like stars. Adrian focused, then removed them. Not physically by hand. He recalled them into infinite supply storage. The armory emptied. Fuel containers vanished. Maintenance tools disappeared. Emergency batteries disappeared. Portable heaters disappeared. Even spare clothing and packaged food inside secure storage rooms vanished. Within seconds, the fortress looked stocked on the surface, but strategically hollow underneath. Maya stared at the inventory dashboard as numbers dropped to 0. She understood. If attackers entered, they would gain walls. Nothing more. Adrian then redistributed essentials directly into occupied safe zones. Food appeared inside residential kitchens. Medical supplies appeared in Elena's clinic. Tools appeared inside Maya's locked engineering room. Weapons appeared only in the hands of trusted security officers. The fortress changed from a warehouse into a living organism. Resources existed only where Adrian wanted them. Now the traitor could steal nothing. A motion sensor triggered. Level 3. Claire enlarged the feed from a secondary camera the infiltrator had missed. A man emerged from behind a service panel. Owen Hale. He carried a compact transmitter. Maya cursed quietly. Owen reached the emergency tunnel controls. He entered a code. Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. Adrian had remotely removed the replacement battery powering the mechanical override. Owen stared at the dead panel. Then the corridor lights went out. Not because he cut them, because Adrian did. Darkness swallowed him. The speakers activated. Adrian's voice echoed through the corridor. He told Owen to place the transmitter on the floor. Owen froze, then ran. He made it 12 meters. A security partition dropped ahead of him. He turned. Another dropped behind. Owen was trapped inside a 5-meter section of hallway. Adrian switched on one ceiling light. A single circle of white illumination surrounded him. Owen looked upward. His face had lost all color. Adrian asked why. At first, Owen denied everything. Then Adrian mentioned the hostages. Owen stopped. That was enough, he had known. Claire's expression hardened. Owen finally admitted it. Darius had captured his wife's sister and her family 2 days earlier. They threatened to kill them unless Owen created an entry path into the fortress. He insisted he had never intended to hurt anyone. He only wanted to open the tunnel long enough for Darius's people to enter. Maya laughed bitterly. That was supposed to reassure them? Adrian did not answer immediately. In his old life, betrayal had felt simple. Marcus and Serena had chosen themselves. Owen's betrayal was uglier. He had chosen people he loved over people who trusted him. The result was the same, but the motive was not. That mattered. Adrian asked whether Darius knew Owen had been caught. Owen shook his head. The transmitter sent only periodic coded signals. He had not activated the final confirmation yet. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Then the plan formed. He ordered the partition opened. Claire stared at him. Maya objected immediately. Adrian told them he was not freeing Owen. He was using him. 10 minutes later, Owen sat in the command room. 2 guards stood behind him. Adrian placed the transmitter on the table. He told Owen to send the confirmation. Owen hesitated. Adrian leaned forward. If he refused, would eventually assume the operation had failed. The hostages at the communication station would die. Owen's relatives would probably die too. If he cooperated, Adrian might save all of them. Might? Owen asked what Adrian wanted him to say. Adrian smiled. Tell Darius the tunnel is open. 23 minutes later, 6 armed men approached the hidden eastern tunnel. They wore white thermal camouflage, suppressed rifles, professional equipment. Not Marcus's starving followers. Darius had sent trained killers. The tunnel hatch opened. They entered silently. Then the door sealed behind them. Lights turned on. The 6 men found themselves standing inside an empty, reinforced chamber. No corridor forward. No target. Only a speaker. Adrian welcomed them. One man immediately fired at the ceiling. The bullet ricocheted. Another rushed toward the door. Locked. Adrian informed them that the chamber was designed as a decontamination lock. It could be isolated from the fortress indefinitely. Then he asked whether they preferred to surrender their weapons or remain there until oxygen became uncomfortable. 3 minutes later, 5 rifles and 1 pistol were lying on the floor. Adrian vented the chamber into a secure holding area. The men were restrained. No one died. More importantly, Adrian captured 6 members of Darius's inner security force alive. That meant information. Routes, schedules, locations. Darius had wanted leverage. Now Adrian had some too. The interrogation began immediately. Adrian did not torture them. He did not need to. He separated them, then offered the same deal to each. Cooperate and receive heat, food, medical care, and protection. Lie and return outside with nothing. In -98 degrees, honesty became surprisingly attractive. Within 15 minutes, the first man broke. Darius's base was the Grand Meridian Mall. Nearly 400 survivors lived there. About 180 were armed, but only 30 truly belonged to Darius. The rest obeyed because he controlled food and heating. Darius rationed supplies deliberately. Enough to prevent rebellion. Never enough to eliminate dependency. Adrian felt disgust. Darius had built a kingdom from scarcity, and that meant infinite supply was the perfect weapon against him. Another captive revealed the communication station hostages were being held in an underground loading dock beneath the mall. The 10 people shown on camera were alive. For now, Darius planned to execute one every 10 minutes after the deadline expired. The third captive revealed something even more useful. The mall's heating system was failing. Darius had less than 2 days of usable fuel. That explained the desperation. He did not want half of Adrian's resources. He needed them. Adrian looked at the clock. 31 minutes remained. Claire asked how they were supposed to rescue hostages in half an hour. They were nearly 15 kilometers away. The storm had worsened. Driving there would take too long. Adrian stared at the territory recognition map. The communication station was already part of the hearth. But the hostages were no longer there. The mall was enemy territory. He could not deliver supplies inside it. Not yet. Then Elena spoke. Could recognize territory move? Everyone looked at her. Adrian asked what she meant. She pointed toward the captured infiltrators. Territory recognition required effective control, boundaries, and security. It did not say anything about ownership. If Adrian could temporarily seize control of part of the mall, Perhaps the system would recognize that section. Maya immediately understood. They did not need the whole building, only the loading dock. Adrian looked back at the system map. A possibility appeared. Uncertain. Perfect, he contacted the hospital. Then, the communication station survivors who had escaped the initial raid. Then every Hearth security group he issued one order. Prepare for remote supply deployment. Adrian opened the captured men's equipment, radios, encrypted communication units, smoke devices, breach tools. Now he had infinite copies. Next, he contacted Doriasa. The video call opened. Marcus appeared first. He looked annoyed. Darius stepped into frame. 26 minutes. Darius reminded Adrian. Adrian told him he accepted half. Marcus smiled. Darius did not. He was too intelligent. He asked for proof. Adrian said he would deliver the first payment immediately. Food, fuel, medicine enough to demonstrate good faith. Darius asked how. Adrian replied that a convoy would approach the west entrance. The hostages would remain alive until delivery was confirmed. Darius agreed. He believed Adrian was surrendering. That was the first mistake. The second happened 6 minutes later. A tracked vehicle appeared on the western road. One of Hearth's remotely controlled transports, empty, except for several crates. Darius' men rushed to meet it. Inside the mall, attention shifted west. Guards moved, cameras rotated, security teams gathered near the entrance, exactly as Adrian intended. Meanwhile, 2 kilometers east, 12 Hearth volunteers moved through a buried service tunnel connected to the old subway maintenance network. One of Adrian's captured men had revealed its location. Maya guided them using old engineering maps. Adrian stayed connected through radio. The team reached the underground loading dock wall with 11 minutes remaining. Concrete separated them from the hostages. Adrian could not deliver supplies yet. The area was still controlled by Darius. So the volunteers did something absurd. They planted a Hearth flag, then secured both tunnel entrances. Then they transmitted visual confirmation. Adrian attempted territory recognition, rejected. Insufficient control. 9 minutes. The volunteers breached the wall. Gunfire erupted. 2 guards inside the loading dock fired. Hearth security responded. 1 guard surrendered. The other fled deeper into the mall. The team entered. 10 hostages were there, alive. Adrian tried again. Rejected. Unstable boundary. 7 minutes. Maya shouted instructions. Seal every access point. The volunteers dragged metal barriers into place. 2 doors, 1 service ramp, 1 interior corridor. Adrian supplied portable locks into the recognized tunnel behind them, but he still could not cross into the loading dock. 5 minutes. Darius appeared on the video feed. He knew something was wrong. Marcus shouted in the background. Adrian ignored them. The Hearth team welded 1 door shut, barricaded another, positioned guards. 3 minutes. Adrian attempted recognition. The system hesitated. Then a cold voice sounded inside his mind. Her territory, Adrian smiled. The loading dock belonged to the Hearth. For system purposes, that was enough. He opened infinite supply. Weapons appeared in secure crates beside his people. Body armor, medical kits, portable heaters, batteries. Then something larger, steel reinforcement panels. The volunteers stared as walls of metal appeared along the weak entrances. Darius's men charged from the interior corridor. They reached the loading dock just as a reinforced barrier materialized in front of them. The corridor sealed. Hostages screamed, then realized the attackers could no longer reach them. 2 minutes. Adrian delivered emergency thermal suits. Each hostage received 1. Portable heat units activated. The freezing loading dock became warm. 1 minute. Darius called again. Adrian answered. Darius demanded to know what he had done. Adrian told him to look at the hostage room. Darius switched feeds. The room was empty. Marcus's face transformed. Adrian leaned toward the camera, then told Darius that half was no longer available. The deadline reached 0. Nobody died. Darius stared at him for several seconds, then smiled. Not Marcus's childish smile, something colder. He congratulated Adrian. Then he revealed the real reason he had arranged the hostage crisis. He never expected Adrian to surrender. He wanted to learn how Adrian's supply network worked. And now he had. Darius turned the camera. Behind him stood a woman wearing a white research coat. Adrian did not recognize her. Elena did. Her face went pale. Dr. Evelyn Frost, one of the country's leading atmospheric physicists, a scientist who had disappeared during the first week of the catastrophe. Evelyn stepped closer to the screen. She told Adrian that -100 degrees was not the disaster. It was merely the first stage. The atmosphere was still destabilizing. The planet would continue cooling, -120, -150, possibly lower. At those temperatures, most remaining infrastructure would fail permanently. But that was not the worst part. Evelyn held up a tablet. A graph appeared. Deep beneath the city, geothermal readings were rising. Something underground was warming while everything above froze. Adrian stared. Evelyn explained that the global freeze might not be natural, and beneath Frosthaven, a massive unknown structure had begun emitting energy. The same night Adrian awakened his system. Darius leaned into the frame. He said there was one more thing Adrian needed to know. Marcus had not found Adrian's fortress by accident. Someone had sent him the coordinates before the apocalypse even began. Someone who already knew Adrian would survive. And on Darius's screen, a file opened. Adrian saw his own name. Below it was a date. 3 years before the freeze. And beneath the date were 4 words that made every person in the command room fall silent. Infinite Supply System Candidate. For the first time since returning from death, Adrian felt the room become truly cold. Not because the fortress heating had failed. Not because the temperature outside had fallen below -100. Because the file on Darius Kane's screen should not have existed. Infinite Supply System Candidate. His name beneath it. 3 years before the apocalypse. 3 years before his death. 3 years before he awakened anything. Claire moved closer to the monitor. Maya stopped breathing for a second. Elena stared at Dr. Evelyn Frost with an expression Adrian had never seen on her face before. Recognition, fear, and guilt. Adrian noticed all three. He looked at Elena. She did not look back. Darius smiled. There it was. Another fracture. Another carefully placed seed of distrust. Marcus had tried to destroy Adrian with greed. Darius preferred information. Far more efficient. Adrian muted the call, then turned toward Elena. He asked how she knew Evelyn. Elena remained silent for several seconds. Finally, she admitted that before working as an emergency physician, she had participated in a government-funded disaster medicine program. Officially, the program studied mass casualty response during extreme weather events. Unofficially, parts of the project were classified. Evelyn Frost had been one of the lead researchers. Adrian asked whether Elena had ever seen his name. She said no. Too quickly, Claire noticed. So did Maya. Sophia folded her arms. Adrian did not accuse Elena. He simply waited. Pressure did not always need force. Sometimes silence did the work. Elena closed her eyes, then admitted there was more. Years earlier, the project had collected medical histories from thousands of people after unusual neurological incidents, migraines, blackouts, near-death experiences, unexplained sensory phenomena. Adrian had been one of them. He remembered. 5 years earlier, he had collapsed at the warehouse. The doctors said dehydration. He recovered within hours, nothing unusual. Except apparently it had been unusual enough for someone to place him inside a classified database. Elena said she had never personally reviewed his file, but she knew the category. Candidate profiles. People whose nervous systems displayed abnormal responses to an unidentified electromagnetic pattern. Maya looked toward the monitor. The same energy pattern now coming from beneath Frosthaven. Adrian unmuted the call. Darius was waiting. He looked pleased. Adrian asked what the file meant. Evelyn answered instead. She said the research began almost a decade earlier. A deep Earth monitoring station outside Frosthaven detected pulses from beneath the continental crust. Regular, artificial-looking, too precise to be geological noise. Scientists initially assumed instrumentation failure. Then people living near certain pulse zones began reporting strange experiences. Dreams that felt like memories, voices, hallucinations involving menus, status displays, invisible interfaces. Most cases were dismissed, a few were not. Some subjects demonstrated impossible statistical anomalies. One woman predicted electrical failures before they happened. A teenager described rooms inside a laboratory he had never visited. A man claimed he could see temperatures without instruments and was correct within fractions of a degree. Then everything stopped, for 6 years, until Adrian woke 3 months before the freeze. Evelyn leaned toward the camera. The underground signal returned at the exact moment Adrian's recorded neural pattern changed. Adrian's jaw tightened. Evelyn nodded. His old medical implant, he had forgotten about it. After the warehouse collapse, doctors had fitted him with a temporary cardiac monitor. Apparently, the device transmitted far more data than he had ever been told. Maya cursed. Adrian asked the obvious question. Was the apocalypse caused by the structure beneath Frosthaven? Evelyn hesitated. That hesitation was more frightening than certainty. She said they did not know. But temperatures worldwide began falling within hours of the signal's return. And every time the underground energy output increased, atmospheric cooling accelerated. Darius interrupted. He did not care about theories. He cared about leverage. He offered Adrian a new deal. No demands for half the hearth, no hostages. Darius had the scientist. Adrian had resources. Together, they could reach the underground structure. Adrian asked why he should trust him. Darius laughed. He should not. Trust was unnecessary when both sides needed the same thing. Adrian considered it. Then Declarcus exploded. He called Adrian an idiot. Darius raised one hand and silenced him. Adrian explained that he did not need Darius. He needed Evelyn. There was a difference. Darius's smile faded slightly. Adrian continued. The Grand Meridian Mall had less than 48 hours of reliable heat. Darius's people were already hungry. His outer followers obeyed because he controlled supplies. The moment that control disappeared, so would his authority. Darius stared at him. Adrian told him he had 12 hours to release Evelyn voluntarily. After that, Adrian would give every civilian inside the mall unlimited food and heat. Directly, without Darius. The call ended. Marcus did not smile this time. Adrian immediately activated the Hearth network. He had already recognized the loading dock territory beneath the mall. That was enough, he began expanding. Not with soldiers, with generosity. First, food appeared inside the loading dock. Not ration boxes, real rice. Chicken, vegetables, bread, fruit, milk, coffee. Then portable heaters, then blankets, then medicine. The rescued hostages were evacuated through the service tunnel. But Adrian kept the territory. Anyone willing to enter peacefully could receive supplies. At first, only a few civilians came. Then dozens. Word spread through the mall. Darius tried to stop it. His guards blocked corridors. People became angry. Adrian sent messages through every emergency frequency he could access. The Hearth would feed anyone who arrived unarmed. No loyalty oath. No payment. No labor requirement for emergency meals. Families first. Children first. The effect was immediate. Darius's kingdom began cracking. He had built authority on scarcity. Adrian introduced abundance. 1 hour later, 50 civilians crossed into Hearth territory. 2 hours later, 100. By the 4th hour, Darius's own guards were bringing their families. Marcus tried to restore order through violence. That was his nature. He struck a man carrying bread. The crowd attacked him. Darius's security had to drag Marcus away. Adrian watched through intercepted camera feeds. He almost felt sorry for Marcus. Almost. The man had survived one apocalypse only to learn that power built from fear evaporated the moment people stopped being afraid. At the fortress, the 4 women worked without rest. Maya coordinated expansion of the territory network. Sophia organized food stations. Elena developed medical triage protocols. Claire handled communications with civilians. Adrian moved between them. Something had changed. Initially, he had selected them because they were people he trusted. Now they were becoming leaders. Sophia, who had once run a tiny restaurant, was feeding hundreds. Maya controlled a distributed energy grid. Elena directed emergency medical operations across multiple locations. Claire managed disputes, applications, and community rules better than anyone Adrian had recruited. The Hearth no longer belonged only to Adrian. That realization should have frightened him. Instead, it gave him relief. A civilization that depended entirely on one man was only another dictatorship waiting to fail. 9 hours after the ultimatum, Darius called. He looked tired. Evelyn sat beside him. No restraints. Darius said he would release her. One condition. Adrian must allow the civilians still under Darius's protection to enter the Hearth without retaliation. Adrian agreed. Marcus shouted from somewhere off camera. Darius ignored him. Then something unexpected happened. Darius asked for asylum too. The command room went silent. Adrian stared. Darius admitted the mall was finished. His men no longer followed orders. His fuel reserves were almost gone, and Marcus had become uncontrollable. Adrian asked why he should admit a man who had taken hostages. Darius did not defend himself. He said because he was useful. That answer Adrian respected. Darius had military logistics experience, security training, organizational skill, and unlike Marcus, he understood when he had lost. Adrian offered terms. Darius would surrender all weapons, accept monitoring, hold no command authority, and face judgment by a civilian council once the Hearth established one. Darius agreed. Marcus did not. That became obvious when gunfire erupted through the video feed. The camera shook. Someone screamed. Darius turned. Marcus had shot one of his guards. Then another. He grabbed Evelyn, pressed a pistol against her head, and dragged her toward the rear exit. Adrian stood instantly. Marcus shouted into the camera that he was done playing. He knew where the underground structure was. Evelyn knew how to enter it, and Adrian needed both. Marcus dragged her away. The feed died. Adrian looked at the map. The mall was 15 kilometers away. Marcus had transportation. He would head underground immediately. Maya pulled up old city infrastructure maps. There were several possible access routes. Most were buried. One connected to an abandoned geothermal research station beneath the northern district, the same district where people had been disappearing. Adrian remembered the reports. Empty apartments, open doors. Maybe they had never been kidnapped. Maybe they had gone underground. The hearth mobilized. This time Adrian did not travel with a small team. He sent 30 security volunteers. Maya, Claire, Sophia insisted on coming too. Adrian refused at first. Sophia looked at him and asked whether he planned to lock all 4 women inside the fortress every time danger appeared. He had no good answer. So they went together. The convoy crossed Frosthaven beneath a sky that no longer looked natural. The clouds had become luminous. Faint blue veins moved across them like frozen lightning. Temperature outside reached -107. Metal street signs cracked spontaneously. Trees split down the middle. The city was dying at the molecular level. At the geothermal station, they found Marcus's abandoned vehicle. The entrance stood open. Warm air drifted from below. Warm. At -107. Adrian felt every instinct scream. They descended. The first underground level was ordinary. Concrete, pipes, dead machinery. The second was different. Ice disappeared from the walls. The temperature climbed above freezing. The third level was warm enough that they removed outer gloves. Then they found the bodies. Not dead, sleeping, hundreds of people. Men, women, children, lying inside enormous chambers, breathing slowly alive. Claire whispered that these were the missing civilians. Evelyn's research equipment surrounded them, but nobody was operating it. Maya examined one machine. It was not human technology, smooth black material. No screws, no visible interface. The structure beneath Frosthaven was not merely emitting energy. It had been growing upward, absorbing the research station, transforming it. Adrian's system voice activated. For the first time, it did not sound cold. It sounded strained. A warning entered his mind. Unrecognized origin infrastructure detected. Supply system compatibility confirmed. Adrian stopped walking. Compatibility. That word changed everything. His system was connected to this place. Ahead, a massive doorway opened by itself. Warm golden light spilled through. Marcus stood inside, Evelyn beside him. But Marcus was no longer holding the gun against her. He was staring at something in the center of the chamber. A black sphere floated above the floor. Lines of light moved across its surface. Adrian stepped closer. The infinite supply system reacted violently. His vision blurred. Memories crashed into him. His first death. The balcony, cold, Serena crying. Marcus closing the door. Then another memory. One that had never happened. Adrian standing beneath a different sky. Cities burning. 4 women beside him. Claire, Maya, Elena, Sophia. Armored. Powerful. Then another memory. Adrian dying again. Then waking again. Another apocalypse. Another attempt. Thousands. Adrian fell to one knee. Claire grabbed him. He could barely hear her. The system voice spoke. It informed him that infinite supply was not a gift. It was a restoration protocol. Adrian had not been chosen 3 years ago. He had been chosen thousands of times. Every failed timeline ended with global collapse. Every time the system returned one compatible human mind backward. But each reset damaged reality. The current freeze was not the original disaster. It was the accumulated consequence of repeated regressions. Adrian stared at the sphere. He finally understood. The apocalypse existed because someone kept trying to prevent it. Marcus laughed, at first softly. Then uncontrollably, he looked at Adrian. He said this was perfect. If the system could reset time, then none of their choices mattered. They could try again and again, until they won. Evelyn screamed at him to stop. Marcus reached for the sphere. Adrian moved. Marcus touched it. The chamber exploded with light. Every monitor activated. Across the walls appeared images of countless timelines. Frosthaven burning. Frosthaven flooding. Frosthaven swallowed by darkness. Frosthaven frozen. In each version, Adrian existed. Sometimes rich. Sometimes poor. Sometimes alone. Sometimes surrounded by people. And in nearly every timeline, Marcus was there too. Adrian understood why. Marcus was not simply a recurring enemy. He was another candidate. The system voice confirmed it. 2 compatible minds had survived repeated restoration cycles. One awakened infinite supply. The other had awakened something else. Marcus's eyes changed. Golden light filled them. He smiled. Then every weapon carried by the Hearth security team vanished. Maya looked down at her empty hands. Adrian felt his infinite supply storage shudder. Marcus raised one palm. A mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. His ability had awakened. Absolute claim. Anything Marcus successfully declared ownerless could become his. Territory, resources, perhaps even people. Marcus looked at Adrian's 4 companions, then at the Hearth soldiers. Then at the enormous underground structure, he spread his arms and declared the entire chamber abandoned property. The black sphere pulsed, the floor shook. Adrian's system screamed a warning. Territory ownership contest initiated. Winner receives control of origin infrastructure. And if Adrian lost, Marcus would not merely take the chamber. He would gain access to the mechanism capable of resetting the world. Again, the declaration hit the chamber like a law of nature. For one impossible second, nothing moved. Then every black surface around Marcus lit up. Lines of gold raced through the underground structure. Walls trembled. The floating sphere above the center platform split with veins of light. And inside Adrian's mind, the infinite supply system delivered a warning harsher than any he had ever heard before. Ownership conflict detected. Origin infrastructure cannot recognize two primary authorities. Adrian felt the floor beneath him pulse. Not metaphorically. The chamber itself was deciding who belonged there. Marcus laughed. He had spent his entire life believing possession was power. Now reality itself had given him an ability built around that instinct. Absolute claim, it suited him perfectly. Marcus stepped forward. He pointed toward one of the rifles lying on the floor. The weapon vanished. A second later, it appeared in his hand. He pointed toward a metal barricade Maya had deployed near the entrance. The barricade disappeared too. Then a crate of medical supplies. Then a portable heater. One by one, anything not actively held or clearly controlled became his. Marcus's smile widened. He told Adrian that infinite supply was impressive, but infinite resources meant nothing if someone else could simply take ownership of them. Adrian did not answer. He was studying the limits. Marcus needed to declare something ownerless. That word mattered. He could not simply steal everything. He needed ambiguity, abandonment, a contested object, a neglected territory. Adrian looked around the chamber again. The system had called this an ownership contest, not a battle, not combat control. That meant brute force was not the answer. Claire understood at almost the same moment. She shouted that everyone needed to establish possession of what they were carrying. Marcus frowned. Claire gripped her thermal pack and said aloud that it belonged to her. Nothing happened. Marcus pointed at it. He declared it abandoned. The pack remained. Maya's eyes widened. So that was it. Absolute claim could seize what lacked active ownership. But ownership could be asserted. Marcus cursed. Then he pointed toward the outer corridor. His voice boomed through the chamber. He claimed every unsecured route beyond the doorway. Golden light spread across the floor. Adrian's system reacted instantly. Territory pressure increased. Marcus was expanding. Adrian closed his eyes. Infinite supply had another advantage. Recognition. The hearth existed because Adrian had learned how to turn people, walls, rules, and responsibility into territory. Marcus believed ownership meant declaring something his. Adrian had learned that ownership meant maintaining something, protecting it, feeding it, making it function. That difference would decide everything. Adrian raised his hand. He did not claim the chamber, not yet. He claimed the people, not as property, as responsibility. He spoke clearly. Every hearth member in this chamber was under his protection. Every civilian sleeping in the lower halls was under hearth protection. Every supply brought here existed for their survival. Every secured path maintained by his team belonged to the hearth network. For a moment, the system remained silent. Then the golden lines beneath Marcus stopped expanding. A second color appeared, white. It spread beneath Adrian's feet. Marcus's smile vanished. Territory recognition accepted provisional authority. The two forces collided, gold against white, claim against stewardship. The chamber shook violently. Evelyn backed away from the sphere. She screamed that they were destabilizing the core. Nobody listened. Marcus pointed toward the sleeping civilians beyond the doorway. Then he made his next declaration. They had no government, no legal authority, no registered homes, no active possessions. Therefore, they were displaced, ownerless population. Adrian's blood went cold. Claire shouted moved first. She stepped between Marcus and the corridor. She declared the civilians' patients under her medical care. The golden light stuttered. Maya immediately followed. She declared the sleeping chamber's infrastructure under hearth engineering supervision. Sophia declared all food stores assigned to registered residents. Claire declared every civilian already entered into hearth protection records. The white light surged. Marcus staggered. Adrian almost laughed. Marcus still did not understand. The system was not rewarding words. It was recognizing relationships, real responsibility, real control, real contribution. Marcus could declare anything, but empty declarations were weak. The hearth had structure. Marcus had appetite. Then the black sphere changed. A new wave of memories struck Adrian. He saw timelines again. In one, Marcus had awakened first. Frosthaven became a city of forced ownership. People wore identification collars. Districts belonged to commanders. Food belonged to Marcus. Heat belonged to Marcus. Eventually, even people belonged to Marcus. That timeline lasted 11 years. Then civilization collapsed from within. In another, Adrian hoarded infinite supply. He built a perfect bunker. He survived while millions died. 37 years later, he was the last human alive in the region. The system reset again. Another timeline. Adrian tried to save everyone. He distributed unlimited supplies without rules. Cities became dependent. Production stopped. Local systems collapsed. When the origin infrastructure malfunctioned, entire populations died because nobody remembered how to sustain themselves. Reset again. Another timeline. Another failure. Infinite supply was never meant to make Adrian king. It was meant to teach him something. Abundance without structure was ruin. Control without compassion was tyranny. Survival required both. Adrian opened his eyes. Marcus was still trying to force his claim across the chamber. He was sweating now. Absolute claim was consuming something, energy. Will, perhaps lifespan. Adrian could see veins darkening beneath Marcus's skin, but Marcus refused to stop. He screamed that everything had always belonged to stronger people. The world before the freeze had simply hidden that truth behind paperwork and laws. Now there were no courts, no governments, no police. Only power. Adrian looked at him calmly. Then he said Marcus was right about one thing. The old world was gone, but he was wrong about what replaced it. Adrian touched the floor. Infinite supply responded. He delivered one object into the chamber, a wooden dining table. Sophia stared. Then Adrian delivered chairs, 5 of them. Marcus looked confused. Adrian produced steaming food, fresh bread, beef stew, fruit tea, the same meal they had shared in the fortress. Marcus started laughing. He asked whether Adrian planned to defeat him with dinner. Adrian said no. He planned to prove ownership. He invited Claire to sit, then Maya, then Sophia. They understood. One by one, they took their places. Adrian sat at the 5th chair. Around them, the chamber still trembled. Golden and white energy still fought across the floor. But in the center of that impossible conflict, 5 people began eating. Marcus stared. Adrian broke bread. He handed part of it to Claire. Sophia poured tea. Maya passed a bowl to Elena. Elena checked the trembling hand of one exhausted security volunteer and told him to sit too. More chairs appeared, more food, more tables. Hearth members sat, then rescued civilians, then even some of Darius's former guards. The chamber filled with people sharing warmth and food. Marcus shouted that they were insane. Adrian looked around. Then the system voice spoke. Stable community function detected. Sustained resource allocation confirmed. Mutual dependency structure confirmed. Territory legitimacy increasing. The white light exploded outward. Marcus screamed. His golden territory collapsed by half. Adrian finally understood the origin infrastructure. It was not asking who could seize the most. It was asking who could create a functioning society. Marcus's power interpreted everything as property. Adrian's power interpreted everything as supply. But beneath both abilities was the same test. What would a human do when given power over survival? Marcus answered by taking. Adrian had once answered by hoarding. Now he answered differently. He built. Marcus fired the rifle. The bullet crossed the chamber. Adrian did not move. Claire ducked. Security lunged. But the bullet vanished halfway through its path. Everyone froze. Adrian had registered that ammunition type weeks earlier. Within recognized territory, the system now understood the projectile as a controlled resource. He recalled it into storage before it reached him. Marcus stared at the empty rifle. Adrian stood. Marcus fired again. Nothing. The rounds disappeared one after another. Marcus threw the weapon aside. Then he claimed the table. It vanished. Adrian produced another. Marcus claimed the chairs. Adrian produced more. Marcus claimed the food. Adrian replaced it instantly. Marcus claimed heaters. More appeared. Blankets. Medicine. Replaced. Water replaced. Every act of theft became meaningless. Marcus's ability could take. Adrian's ability could make loss irrelevant. That realization destroyed Marcus faster than any weapon could have. His entire worldview depended on scarcity. If there was only one loaf of bread, the man who owned it ruled. If there were infinite loaves, ownership lost its teeth. Marcus screamed. He expanded absolute claim recklessly. The golden light surged again. This time he claimed the entire origin infrastructure. The black sphere pulsed. Adrian's system issued a catastrophic warning. Forced ownership attempt detected. Core synchronization unstable. Atmospheric cooling acceleration imminent. Evelyn ran toward the central console. She shouted that global temperatures were dropping again. -112. minus 115, minus 119. The structure was responding to conflict. The freeze worsened whenever the restoration system destabilized. Maya rushed to Evelyn. Together they studied the alien displays. Evelyn suddenly understood something. The underground structure was not causing the freeze intentionally. It was drawing thermal energy from the planet to power repeated timeline resets. Every regression consumed heat. Every attempt to rewrite history cooled the world further. The planet had been paying for their second chances. Adrian stared at the sphere. Thousands of resets, thousands of stolen futures. The only way to stop the freeze was to end restoration permanently. But that meant no more retries. No returning from death. One final timeline. Marcus heard. His face twisted. He refused. If they shut down restoration, every mistake became permanent. Every death became permanent. He called that madness. Adrian finally saw Marcus clearly. Marcus was not afraid of dying. He was afraid of consequence. As long as the world could reset, nothing truly mattered. Betrayal could be erased. Murder could be undone. Failure could be retried. Marcus wanted infinite chances because he had never learned how to live with one. Adrian approached the sphere. Marcus attacked. No weapon, no trick. He simply rushed forward and drove his shoulder into Adrian. They crashed onto the floor. For a moment there were no systems, no powers, no cosmic infrastructure. Just two men. Marcus punched him. Adrian hit back. Marcus clawed at his throat. Adrian slammed him against the platform. Years of resentment exploded between them. The balcony, the betrayal, the frozen death, all of it. Marcus shouted that Adrian had always been weak, that people only followed him now because he could feed them. Adrian punched him again, then stopped, because Marcus was partly right. Power had opened the door. Infinite supply had given Adrian something no ordinary survivor possessed, but people had stayed because of what he did with it. That was the difference Marcus could never understand. Adrian stood. He stepped away. Marcus laughed through blood. He asked whether Adrian lacked the courage to finish him. Adrian replied that killing Marcus was easy. Building something Marcus could never control was harder. Security surrounded him. This time, Marcus had nowhere to run. Adrian reached the sphere. The system offered a choice. Continue restoration protocol, preserve timeline reset capability, or terminate restoration. Release stored planetary thermal energy. Seal the current timeline permanently. The consequences were clear. If Adrian terminated it, temperatures would begin rising, slowly. Infrastructure would remain devastated. Billions might already be dead. There would be no miraculous return to the old world. No reset. No perfect ending. They would have to rebuild from whatever remained. Adrian looked at Claire. Then Maya, Elena, Sophia. None spoke. They did not need to. He chose termination. Marcus screamed. The sphere turned white. A wave passed through the chamber. Then through Frosthaven. Then across the world. Every system display went dark. Adrian collapsed. For several seconds there was nothing. No mechanical voice. No hidden space. Adrian's heart stopped. Claire caught him before he hit the floor. Then the voice returned. Faint. Almost human. Restoration protocol terminated. Infinite supply function retained. Emergency planetary recovery initiated. Adrian laughed weakly. Of course. The system had not disappeared. It had changed purpose. No more resets. No more timeline destruction. Infinite supply would remain only as a reconstruction tool. Outside, the temperature stopped falling. Minus 123. Then nothing. 1 minute. 5. 10. For the first time since the catastrophe began, the number did not decrease. Hours later, it rose by a fraction of a degree. The world had reached its bottom. They had survived it. Marcus sat restrained beside the wall. He looked smaller now, not physically, conceptually. Absolute claim had vanished when restoration ended. Without cosmic power behind him, he was only Marcus again. A selfish man in a frozen world. Adrian looked at him. Marcus asked what happened next. Adrian answered simply, consequences. Darius eventually submitted himself to the Hearth Council. Unlike Marcus, he cooperated fully. He provided intelligence about remaining hostile groups. He helped dismantle the Brotherhood of Ash. He accepted judgment for the hostages he had taken. The council sentenced him to supervised labor and permanent removal from command authority. Marcus received no special execution. Adrian refused to turn him into a martyr. Instead, Marcus was tried publicly. Evidence was presented. Survivors testified. The people he had robbed spoke. The families of those he had abandoned spoke. Serena testified too. She admitted everything, including what happened in Adrian's first timeline, though nobody outside the inner circle fully understood that part. Marcus was sentenced to permanent confinement and labor under guard. He hated it. That was precisely why Adrian accepted the decision. Death would have been escape. Living in a society where he owned nothing but his own choices was a harsher lesson. Serena asked Adrian for forgiveness. He gave her something else, closure. He told her he no longer hated her. But trust, once destroyed, was not a resource his system could duplicate. She joined one of the civilian work teams. They rarely spoke again. Months passed. The planet warmed slowly. -100 became -90. Then -70. Still catastrophic, but survivable with infrastructure. The hearth expanded across Frosthaven, then beyond it. Adrian's territory recognition network reached other towns. Supply stations appeared. Hospitals reopened. Power grids were rebuilt. Greenhouses were constructed underground. Maya developed closed-loop heating systems using duplicated industrial components. Elena organized medical schools because doctors were now more valuable than gold. Sophia turned the food network into something more than ration distribution. She insisted people deserved meals. Not just calories, soup, fresh vegetables, seasoning, birthday cakes when ingredients and schedules allowed. Adrian initially called it inefficient. Sophia told him civilization without joy was just organized survival. He stopped arguing. Claire became the political center of the hearth almost accidentally. People trusted her. She listened before deciding. She challenged Adrian openly when he became too controlling, especially then. Years later, historians would argue about what to call the system they created. A survival network. A resource republic. Adrian did not care. He only cared that no child froze because someone wanted leverage. That no doctor had to choose which patient lived because medicine ran out. That no dictator could rule simply by locking food behind a door. And the 4 women who had entered his fortress at the beginning never left his life. The world started joking about Adrian and his 4 wives long before any ceremony made the relationships official. Sophia encouraged the rumors. Maya pretended they annoyed her. Elena claimed the entire subject was medically irrelevant. Claire turned red every time someone mentioned it. Adrian discovered that surviving the apocalypse was easier than navigating 4 women who all knew exactly when he was lying. They argued. Constantly. Maya complained that Sophia stored spices beside sensitive electronics. Sophia threatened to cook Maya's circuit diagram. Elena enforced sleeping schedules everyone ignored. Claire somehow settled arguments while starting new ones. Adrian loved every second of it. Years after the freeze, the 5 of them returned to the original mountain fortress. Outside, the temperature had risen to -18. For the first time in almost a decade, controlled outdoor agriculture had become possible in sheltered valleys. Children played in the snow without treating it as death. The fortress dining room remained almost unchanged. Sophia placed beef stew on the table, fresh bread beside it, tea fruit, exactly like the meal underground during the ownership contest. Adrian looked around. Claire sat beside him. Maya was complaining about a power relay. Elena told her to stop working during dinner. Sophia demanded everyone appreciate the bread before it became cold. Adrian smiled. In his first life, he had died begging people he loved to let him stay warm. In this life, warmth surrounded him. Not because of heaters, not because of infinite fuel, not even because of the system, because the people at his table would never push him outside to save themselves. A notification quietly appeared in his mind. The infinite supply system had detected a new registered resource. Adrian frowned. He had not touched anything unusual. Then the system clarified. It had attempted to classify the resource and failed. The resource could not be duplicated, could not be stored, could not be transferred, could only be maintained. Adrian almost laughed. Trust. For once, the system had finally discovered something infinite supply could not create. Claire asked why he was smiling. Adrian looked at the 4 women who had survived the end of the world beside him. Then he looked through the window. Beyond the fortress, lights burned across Frosthaven. Thousands of them. Homes, hospitals, workshops, schools, restaurants. A city alive again. Adrian answered that he had just remembered something important. Having infinite supplies had never been the greatest power. Knowing who to share them with was. Outside, snow continued falling. But for the first time, nobody feared it.